Welcome to episode 73 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alasdair and Jane.
And myself, Jane Bond.
And this week we are continuing our journey through the waste hierarchy and we're going to look at recovery. And by that we mean recovery of energy. But before we do that, any news, Jane? There's always news, isn't there? In the big bad world of waste.
Oh, there's always news. It's just, we've just got a brief selection of news for you. One of the ones we're just looking at was private equity firm, KR equity firm. What does that mean? Is going to sell its UK-based recycling group, Viridor. So there we go. Going to sell Viridor. Bought them 5 years ago. And it looks like particularly issues have been the plastic recycling plants, because they're looking to close the one in Rochester and Kent due to wider market challenges. So we're having issues with our polymers. We posted a loss, it says here, of 29.3 million for Viridor polymers. It's a bit scary.
But it looks like they've done not too bad, because they bought Viridor from the Penning Group in March 2020 for 4.2 billion, and they're looking to get 7 billion. So that's not a bad wee return over 5 years.
No, not bad at all.
It's probably good to talk about this while we're doing a one on recovery, because I think just about every energy from waste facility in the UK is currently up for sale in various formats, because the parent companies are up for sale. So it'll be an interesting space to watch. It is a bit depressing when you mentioned the plastic there, Jane, that you probably saw in the main news that the Global Plastics Treaty came to an end without any agreement. So they talked for 2 weeks about plastics and they still couldn't come up with a plan between them. How they could sit and talk for 2 weeks about plastic, I'm not sure. I think that would even my interest of waste, I would probably struggle with that, June.
Yeah. I mean, what were they supposed to be discussing anyway? Are they talking about how much plastic should be recycled, or what can you talk about for 2 weeks?
I think they were trying to agree. I think they were trying to agree a reduction on the production of plastic, because I think it's some of the facts we presented previous episodes about the massive tonnage of plastic that's put into the market every year, and it's only growing at the moment. And now we know it's pretty harmful for the environment. Maybe we should be trying to get that number down a little bit. But there'll be strong lobby groups in there that'll be trying to fight their corner, sadly.
Yeah, because it's talking about trying to end plastic pollution, an agreement to end plastic pollution. So, which is, a pretty important thing based on all the discussions we've had around plastics. So, yeah, I don't know how you can do 2 weeks without. There must be quite a strong lobby from the plastics manufacturers. And then the other one, again, this is kind of slightly more positive than what we spoke about probably about a few weeks ago, about the energy from waste plant at Ness, the northeast of Scotland. So we mentioned at one point that it had closed and all the waste was being diverted, and Indava, which who were running the plant, were walking away from the project. So they have now walked away from the project, and the original company, what was it called? Acciona? I don't know how you pronounce it. ACCIONA are taking full ownership. So, we'll see what happens. But at least
I think it's
up and running again. Yeah.
So I was going to say, I think it's back up and running. I did notice the 3 local authorities, which will be Moray Council, Aberdeenshire Council and Aberdeen City Council, had a rush tender out for disposal of waste to landfill. So I'm sure people have spent lots of time putting that tender in, and now they no longer require that tender. So,
well, I don't know. It's a good kind of backstop, isn't it? Just in case.
Have you backstop?
Yeah.
And there was good news that appeared in the national news actually last week about Libat, who have just started their lithium-ion battery recycling facility. So this is where they're taking lithium-ion batteries, they're shredding them under nitrogen, because if you shred it normally they just explode, and they are managing to extract the cobalt, the nickel, the manganese and lithium, and they also get what they call black mass. Now, unfortunately in the UK there's no place that reprocesses black mass, and it gets sent all the way to China to get made into new batteries. But at the very least, it's a start that we're actually got some sort of capability to recycle lithium-ion batteries in the UK.
Yeah, pretty important, that nitrogen side of it, isn't it? To make sure you shred them and it doesn't all burst into flames.
Just a wee touch.
So, yeah, another fire at a waste recycling centre, stroke landfill site. Yeah, our guys from, well, friends from Sureco at their site at Lockhead landfill site, that went up in flames on Sunday. It was in the newspaper. I don't know whether you've got any more news on that one, Alasdair, or not, from your
No, I think it was just
rumour mill.
from what I understand, the waste, it's a shredding line that they store the waste outside because they've had issues in the past with fire. The waste was stored outside, no processing going on, and the waste combusted into flames for whatever reason. They're still trying to work out what the reason was. As far as I know, there were no injuries or loss of life or anything, but there was damage to plant and equipment. And it was when you look at the pictures of the actual fire, it was a pretty substantial fire. But it's just back to what we've been banging on about for ages. We need to get this sorted out about batteries and vapes and that type of stuff and waste. And we need to make sure they don't go in the waste.
Especially when it's been such nice weather as well. And, you know, the waste has probably dried out a little bit as well. Seems to have certainly caught fire.
But some of the safety stuff that I've been on recently, they reckon it's between 3 and 4 vehicles a day are going on fire in the UK because of vapes and because of waste fires. We can't keep sustaining that. We've got to do something pretty big to actually really force the public not to put batteries or vapes into residual bin.
Yeah.
I would say it's much more than just a campaign. It's more like really strong messaging about the fact that, it's totally unacceptable to do that, and it's a big fire risk. Because at some point, we're going to have one of these fires that, people are going to be killed or badly injured. Fortunately, we've not had that yet, but it's going to come. Anyway, that's maybe a bit depressing to finish our news, is it, Jane?
Yeah, it is a little bit. I don't think we've got any quirky news this time round, have we?
I did try and find a fun fact, but we failed miserably. But anyway, this week we are going to talk about recovery. And what do we mean by recovery? Recovery, we mean recovering the energy from the waste. So to try and recover some remaining value from it. So ultimately, if you've not listened to previous episodes, episode 68, we looked at reducing the amount of waste we produce. Episode 69, we looked at how we can reuse waste. And then in episode 72, we looked at recycling. So before we put any waste for recovery, we should have done these first 3 stages. Challenge we've got is, as I've harped on for long and weary, about 80% of residual waste in Scotland anyway should not actually be in the residual waste. It's food waste that should be going to AD plants. It's recycling that should go recycling. So we're actually burning a lot of waste or trying to recover energy from a lot of waste. We should actually be trying to recover the material. So over to you, Jane, for a wee description about. Yeah.
When we're talking about, after you were just talking really there about energy from waste, because we've got 2 sort of sides to the waste treatment. We've got the energy from waste, which, like you say, is all about your residual waste, what's left over. We've also got anaerobic digestion as well, which actually covers more on the food waste side of it as well. And that's quite really, really important, because we've got our anaerobic digestion, which as it states is anaerobic, as in without oxygen, and it breaks down the food waste into methane gas, which can be captured, and into a kind of digestate, which you can use on farms and stuff like that. So it actually does provide you with some useful products. And I know with the anaerobic digestion, if you look at it, it's not just food waste. Farmers use it for their waste side of it, and particularly distillery, whiskey distilleries, they use it for their draff and that, or their pot ale or whatever that comes out of it. That's not whiskey. They shove it in and then that produces methane gas, and then they can actually use that to heat back the process. If you look at it that way, your food waste, taking out your food waste is really, really important. All right.
No, that's a good summary there, Jane. So, you take out the food waste, you generate methane that generates electricity, and then that digestate can be used on land. So it's a real, in all sorts of ways, it's a win-win. The focus should be on getting people to use their food waste collection. We're going to cover anaerobic digestion in a bit more detail in a future episodes. We'll not dwell on it too much. Waste energy, incineration, call it what you like. There are different terminologies. There are different reasons for the terminologies. Quite often, it is to do with at what point air is put into the system for combusting the waste. Depends on what it's actually called. The cynic in me says that most waste companies will try and avoid using the word incineration as much as possible, because historically incineration's had a bit of a bad rap in the UK. So if you go back to when I was running landfill sites back in the 1990s, 95, 90. Is very polluting, very dangerous, very, all sorts of things. I always explain when I'm doing lectures on this to university students, I always explain really simply, in terms of waste, you can do three things with it. You can throw it in the land, as in landfill. You can chuck it in the river and the seas, which ideally we're not wanting to do, but much of the developing world actually does that, which is why we've got so much plastic in the oceans. Or we can chuck it up in the sky. And that's fundamentally the three things we can do with waste. So waste energy is basically taking the waste. If you burn, very roughly, if you burn 100 tons of waste, you'll end up with 10 or 15 tons of ash in various formats, and then the rest will be put into emissions to the atmosphere. Now, obviously, they're not allowed to put pollutants into the atmosphere, so the bulk of what you see in an energy for waste facility, when you look at the size and scale of it, much of that size is down to the gas cleanup kit that they've got to put in to clean up the gases and the emissions. So they're actually, in terms of emissions to the environment, they operate to really, really high standards. In fact, much more stringent standards than, for example, a coal-fired power station would.
I think as well with that, we used to, like years ago, there used to be incinerators everywhere, didn't they? I mean, if you look at all the hospitals at one time, they had incinerators. If you look at, there was one at Polmadie for Glasgow City Council had a incinerator. There was loads of them around, and then they realised they were putting out some, lots of black smoke, and there was no, all it was a chimney. There was no sort of very little abatement. Whereas now, so they obviously stopped those. Whereas now, we're looking at quite a sophisticated abatement system and pollution control system, and it's night and day between what it was like previously.
So Jane, what's the positives? Give me sell me waste energy. Sell me the positives.
Well, I guess waste to energy, whatever you look at it, we need to get rid of waste. We cannot recycle everything. So there's always going to be something left. So we've got to do something with it. And if we're actually going to recover something as well, and if we can actually produce electricity or heat from that waste and reuse it or use it if you look at Shetland, Shetland's one of the ideal places if you look at a waste to energy plant. They've got a site up there. Waste to energy takes all the waste off Shetland, all the non-hazardous waste, domestic waste, all that sort of stuff off Shetland, and it has district heating. So then it heats up the water, and the water goes round all the around the nearby town, and that's ideal. And a lot of the sites in Europe do that as well. It's quite difficult to retrofit. So when you're fitting a landfill energy from waste facility, what you need is somewhere nearby that'll take off that heat or take off that energy and the electricity. So that's the the important part. So if you do that, take out all your recycling first, and we've burnt the rest of it, we can produce energy, we can produce heat. We can also, the ash that's produced, also putting that through a metal detector. Not a metal detector, what do you call them? A magnet.
Magnet even, Jane.
Well, yeah, I suppose it's a kind of big metal detector. Anyway, put it through a metal detector, and then we can take out all the metals and recycle in that metals. So that can be done as well, because when you look at it, oh my god, it heats up so much, doesn't it? You look when you go to an energy from waste facility, and I went to the one up in Ness, up in Aberdeen a while back, and that is actually quite shiny. And but you can see the fire burning, you can see the waste being burnt and the ash being produced. It's actually quite fascinating. Yeah, so to all of
I was
that.
actually just reading today, Jane, about a company in Germany that is set up to really focus on extracting all the metals out of the ash. And there's a bit of thought that, there's some pretty precious metals in there that we should be getting back out. And the other one is some of the companies are looking at carbon capture, where you're capturing the carbon dioxide and putting it underground to further reduce their emissions. And I do know you mentioned the heat recovery for the district heating. I know the FCC plant just outside Edinburgh, the new housing estate that's getting built nearby that site, is actually getting a district heating system built as part of the housing development. So we can do it with a bit of planning, a bit of thought. The new plant up at Dundee, the one that MBV runs, they have the ability to supply heat, and they were meant to supply heat to, I think it was Pirelli tyres, certainly a tyre company that was in the neighbouring unit. But unfortunately, that company went broke and never actually started. So they do actually have all the facility to provide heat to somebody up there, but they need
somebody to provide it to.
That needs the heat. So it's a bit sad that there's all that energy sitting there to be used, and we can't use it. Yeah, that's the good. I suppose what's the bad? The bad is emissions, and I think, if I've been honest, probably emissions in the past were the issue. The gas cleanup technology nowadays is incredible in terms of what they can do and what they can achieve. There are still emissions, there's no denying there's still emissions, but at the end of the day, somehow or other we need to handle this waste. And there's emissions from landfill, for example, which is the alternatives. There is difficulties. They also get accused of being hungry beasts, as in if they're contracted for, I don't know, 100,000 tonne or 200,000 tonne of waste a year, that's what they need to operate. That's when they need to pay, to pay the bank loans. Quite often they're 20, 25-year projects. So there's almost a disincentive to do that recycling bit, because that would further reduce tonnage. That's often what's thrown at them. It is quite interesting with the current issues in Scotland with the landfill ban coming in force on the 1st of January, the fact we've not actually got enough capacity. And what's coming out quite clearly in that is that one of the drawbacks of waste energy is that it's not very flexible. You can't suddenly increase throughput, whereas in the past, landfill, you could increase throughput quite easily. So if you have a couple of plants going down at the same time, then there's actually quite a major problem for waste management in the UK. They do operate 24/7, 365 days a year, which is no bad thing, but they do have this real restricted throughput. And their throughput, quite often these facilities are priced on tonnage, but the reality is their throughput is restricted by the amount of calorific value they can actually combust in a set period. So they'll have a calorific value limit. So that's, again, what's causing a bit of the problem with some of the commercial waste streams, which have a higher plastic content and higher calorific value, and therefore less of that waste can go through the plant at any one time. So there's sort of challenges there. At the end of the day, not everything can be incinerated. We still need landfill. We still need a disposal outlet for some of the hazardous waste ashes and so on. And I suppose the biggest thing that gets thrown at them is we're actually destroying the resources. We're burning them. And maybe at some point, a later date, we may actually want these resources back. So there is a bit of I'm not saying a campaign, but there's a bit of interest in actually trying to segregate out plastics, for example, and put them in what we call a mono disposal cell in a landfill, and retain them, store them, if you like, for 10, 15 years' time when the technology is available to actually process that, better than we can do at the moment. So that's the bad.
Okay.
I'm sure there are
Yeah.
lots of people, friends of the earth and the likes, which will say that I've given them too easy a ride there. But at the end of the day, we need to manage waste. If we're not going to engage the public properly to actually recycle, the quantities that I think they can, then we're going to need either waste energy or landfill, and they're both probably as bad as each other.
I mean, you need the landfill anyway, realistically, because you've got all that burned, and what you've got at the end, like you said there, you've got 15 to 20 tons of ash. You can't burn that again. So by the time you've extracted all the metals and stuff, it's, you've still got somewhere you need to put that to landfill. There's opportunities there. There's been different opportunities to use it as construction material, and how that will work in making sort of blocks for building blocks and things like that. So that's another opportunity there, which could reduce the amount of material going to landfill. And I like the carbon capture idea. I get the idea, but I don't quite understand how it works. So perhaps we'll need to see if we can get somebody on to talk about what is carbon capture and how does it do? I mean, yeah, anyway, we can talk about that one.
I think without making it really simple, I think they actually just put the emission underground.
Well,
so
yeah,
rather
that's
than
right.
the emissions going out the stack, it gets pushed underground, and it should stay underground.
Yeah, but then what happens to it? Does it just stay underground? Is it like just storing it?
It stays there. So you're effectively storing it. But I think, we're saying that really flippantly, but I think the technology to actually do that is much, much harder. And that's why when you look at the cost of some of these carbon capture schemes are pretty significant.
Because one of the things with the incineration, the energy from waste, that's going to be coming into the emission trading scheme. And we can talk about that. And that's probably something where the carbon capture is really important to reduce costs as well.
So what's going to happen with that, Jane?
Oh my goodness, you put me on the spot there. Well,
putting you on the spot.
I know. I shouldn't have said anything. Well, the emission trading
we don't actually quite know, because it's still under consultation.
Yeah, and it's still discussed, and I think it's supposed to come into the trading. It's supposed to come into fruition in 2028, and the idea is you're paying for carbon emissions out of the stack. And what's happened is, with landfill, you've had the landfill tax, and you've not actually had as much you haven't had any tax as such on energy from waste, and now this is basically a tax on the emissions. So that's and I think there's real concern that the cost of managing waste from the local authorities is going to increase significantly because of this tax.
So my understanding was this has still been debated a little bit, and it's still under consultation. So it's UK government, and the logic for the power sector was that if you're generating power, you had to pay, a carbon tax, if you like. So if you're emitting carbon from your, coal-fired power station, you had to pay tax on that. And what's happened is the waste sector has been pulled into that agreement, if you like, or that requirement. So what it means at the moment, and this is maybe one of the things worth chatting through, is so landfill tax at the moment is £126 a tonne, I think it is, and a gate fee for a landfill would be about £30 a tonne. So landfill disposal cost, taking your stuff to landfill, is probably about £160, £170 a tonne. So interesting enough, the gate fee for waste energy plants sits at probably £5 or £10 below that. So gate fee for waste energy sits about maybe £140, £150 a tonne. So there's already a driver towards waste energy because it's cheaper if you can find the capacity. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen when the emission trading scheme comes in is they're going to be hit with maybe an £80 or a £90 charge. So then suddenly the waste energy price will be much more significant than landfill. So it'll then effectively make landfill dearer. So there's thought that the landfill tax is then just going to have to increase to keep pace. So
yeah,
I think the only thing it's going to do is make it more interesting for criminals to fly tip waste around the corner, because disposal costs in terms of tax will be massive. So, but I think the one of the things that is worth chatting through for the emission trading scheme is to do with the amount of carbon in the waste, which is largely down to the amount of plastic in the waste. So in theory, there should be an incentive for local authorities or waste producers to remove plastic from the waste stream. And if they could remove plastic from the waste stream, then their emission trading scheme tax would be less. But it doesn't look like that tax is going to be charged like that, because they're thinking it's going to be far too complicated to try and work out a carbon value for each waste stream. So they're just applying a flat rate across the sector. So it's almost disincentivizing removal of plastic from the waste stream. So hopefully that's a brief summary and we've not got it wrong, because I know it's a hugely complex area, and both myself and Jane are working slightly at the edges of this. So if there's any experts out there that disagree with us, we're quite happy to get them on, and we can have a chat through. But I think at the moment is still under discussion and debate. But at the end of the day, a local authority they can't control how much waste the public produce. The public produce it, and effectively they're going to have a £80 or £90 a tonne extra charge on their bill. That's what it's going to come to. So.
And I think the idea with all these increasing prices and all that sort of stuff, the financial drivers, is to try and improve the processing. So you increase your recycling, to reduce your costs of your landfill or your energy from waste facility, and so you can process your plastics instead. But there's very limited processing facilities in the UK, as we've seen with Viridor's plant going belly up.
And all the other ones we've highlighted, the Biffa one, the other ones we've highlighted. So
I mean, you kind of think there's a market opportunity, but obviously the cost of recycled plastics or whatever just doesn't match up.
It is a bit like we talked last episode about recycling. There's got to be a value to it. There's got to be a revenue, and obviously it's too tight at the moment. It's too complicated. So an increase in rates for disposal may drive that further. Who knows? Last thing we were going to talk about this, Jane, was the landfill ban, which we've touched on earlier. So the biodegradable landfill ban comes into force in Scotland on the 1st of January 2026. And notice I said biodegradable landfill ban. So waste is still allowed to go to landfill as long as it doesn't fall into that biodegradable category. Generally, household waste, commercial waste will be classified as biodegradable, because it'll have food waste in, it'll have cardboard, it'll have paper, wood, things like that. The concern at the moment in Scotland is there's estimated, well, I was going to say estimated, but it's anything between 300,000 tonnes and about 600,000 or 700,000 tonnes of waste, which hasn't got a contracted home with an energy from waste facility. So when you work that back out, it's something like 70 loads a day needing to go south of the border to find a disposal outlet, to find a landfill site, which seems a hell of a lot. And that was all explored in the BBC Disclosures programme fairly recently, where Kevin Keane, the environment correspondent, did a programme, an episode on Where Will All My Rubbish Go, which talked quite a lot about waste energy.
Which had starring roles
from
Alasdair
from
here.
myself. I had starring roles from a few of our contacts. Yes.
Yes, if you're a rubbish
so
talk
if you're absolutely. So if you're interested in that, have a wee watch. It does give us a summary. It's probably outdated already, actually, although it was only just recently put out. So that's our brief introduction to what we mean by recovery in terms of waste. Any actions we can take as members of the public to do here?
Listen to our prevent, reuse and recycle episodes, because basically we want to stop it going into the waste stream in the first place, and if you can't do that, reuse it, and if you can't do that, recycle it, so we can make sure that none of this waste goes into an incineration and we can actually use it, particularly your food waste, to anaerobic digestion.
Well, that was, I think, I've not got the figures to hand, but I am sure I did. So my usual rant is that only 20% of people in Scotland actually use their food waste collection. If you averaged up across Scotland, the other 80%, we would not have a capacity gap in terms of waste energy. Because that food waste, if that was all extracted, would then reduce the total tonnage that would no longer have a capacity gap. If we're worried about the capacity gap, then use the recycling system as it was designed.
And I'm still a bit slightly shocked about. I've been speaking to a lot of people recently about food waste recycling, how important it's food waste, and people are like, "No, I don't do it. No, it's horrible. It's disgusting. We get maggots." And I'm like, I have never had maggots, and we discussed this previously as well. So you've never had maggots in your food waste as well,
I've been doing food waste for 10 years and never had a maggot.
And me too. So either they're really, really doing it wrong, or there's some rogue maggots that only, I don't know. Yeah. So it's not difficult, to be fair. Food waste compost. You just need to keep your lid closed on it. That's all.
I think you're setting a challenge to listeners, Jane. If you don't use your food waste currently, and you don't have your collection caddies, phone your council, get your collection caddies and start doing your food waste, and you will see that you don't have maggots, and you will actually quite like it because it's actually really easy to use.
It is very easy to use.
Your residual bin bin does not have any maggots. I put my residual bin out last week after 3-week collection, and it literally had this wee tiny bag of rubbish in the bottom. And I actually looked at it and thought, that's not even worth putting out. That's not even worth the collection crew coming and getting it.
Oh, you're so good, Alasdair.
I did put out. I felt as if I needed to get value from my council service. I did put out. So there we go. That's our action from a wee summary. And last but not least, we have our rubbish rant. I seem to be claiming all the rubbish rants, Jane. You need to get in quicker with the prep. So mine is there's an organisation called the National Cup Recycling Scheme, NCRS. And that scheme is administered by Valpac, and they have announced the launch of a new £45,000 project fund. So if you're in the business of trying to recycle or recover coffee cups, you can apply for this fund.
Yeah, and apparently it's been funded by Costa Coffee, McDonald's, Pret a Manger, Caffè Nero, Lavazzo, Greggs and Burger King, all these big places that you go and get your cup of coffee from. And presumably, that's a lot of coffee cups, Alasdair.
Well, RAP estimates that there's 3.2 billion coffee cups discarded every year in the UK. So I did a few sums, did a wee bit of tallying up. Average coffee cup's about 10 grams. So that
you've been weighing these coffee cups.
I've been waiting. No, I actually use Google. It ranges between 8 grams and 12 grams. So I plumped for the middle. So average of 10 grams, which seemed about right to me. And if you take a disposal fee, we just talked about £160 a tonne, that is a cost to the UK economy of £5.12 million. If you take their piddling wee £45,000 they've donated to this fund, that is less than 1% of the cost. And bear in mind, I was just using the disposal cost. It does not include the cost of collection, the street cleansing, the picking up the litter, all that extra cost that comes from coffee cups. And it actually turns out that is less than 0.01% of these companies' profits. So who's doing who a favour here?
So they're putting in about £5,000 each from, just if you take a round figure, and you're thinking, well, really? But
the waste from their operation is costing £5.12 million. So it's just madness. So I think they need to start stepping up the game a wee bit and contributing a bit more. But the other thing I did look at is part of their thing is they're saying that that's. They claim to have recycled 233 million cups, which is about just over 2,000 tonnes of waste into new products. Now, I don't honestly know where that plant is in the UK. Now, I'm sure it is someplace, and I'm sure that somebody listening will tell us where that plant is. And I would love to speak to them about what they're actually doing with these coffee cups. So, seemingly, they've recovered 2,330 tonnes of cups someplace in the UK.
But these cups are quite awkward, aren't they? Because they tend to have a plastic inner rather than just paper.
Exactly. What have they been turned into? I would love to know.
Yeah, because some of them, I suppose, do say they're compostable, isn't there? There's some of these coffee cups and stuff that are compostable, and it could be those, but again, you've got to make sure they go to the right place.
The general Greggs, Burger King, they will be a cardboard outer and a plastic liner. So what are they converting them into? Is it fresh cardboard, or is it new plastic fence posts? If anybody out there knows,
yeah, let us know.
Please let us know. But I think their 45,000 is a bit miserable compared with their annual profits. That's my rant of the week, Jane.
Yeah, but what is the £45,000 for? This is a project fund.
It's to go into, I never,
to who?
I never looked into all the detail, but to sort of recycling companies or not-for-profits to actually encourage recycling of coffee cups.
Oh, right. Okay. So 45,000 actually is not a lot, really, to be fair.
No. And if you really want to avoid using a coffee cup, take your reusable one.
Yeah. Yeah. That always works.
Do you realise, have a guess, Jane, 3.2 billion cups a year. On average, how many cups is everybody disposing in the UK every year? Well,
that must be a lot, because there's about 62 million of us. So 62 million. And at 3.2 billion
in the UK now.
Oh, is it 69? Right, yeah. I've been using 62.
9.
Okay, so there's a bit of
49 cups per annum. I'll put you out of your misery.
49 cups per person?
49 cups per annum.
Wow, somebody must be using a lot, because I don't use any. Because I don't have any.
So one a week.
Really?
On average. Remember 69,000 will include children as well, so there's probably lots of children not using.
Yeah, to be fair.
So it's probably more than that.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
And if you think back 10 years, we never used a disposable cup 10 years ago. It's all quite a new phenomenon. I can't say that word out.
I was going to say.
Anyway, that's probably long enough with it. That's probably more than long enough about the rant about coffee cups. So.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you do know who's recycling them, who's recovering them, please let us know.
Yeah, please let us know. And in future, don't use a disposable coffee cup. Take your own. Or remember, we did that while back. We did that coffee cup, borrow cup thing as well. So
borrow
again,
cup
there we
Glasgow,
go.
Certainly in Glasgow.
Yeah. So right, rant over, Alasdair. So again, well, thank you very much for listening to us. That was our next time. We're going to talk about litter and responsibility. And anything you've got, any comments, anything, we have actually today, we've put out a lot of asks from our listeners to tell us things that we may have got wrong, or we don't have enough detail. And, coffee cups is just one of them. So, yeah, give us a shout.
The coffee cup rant actually came from a listener. So thank you to that listener. I'm not going to name him because he doesn't want to be named, but that actually came from a listener who sent me in that direction. So there you go. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you again next Thursday at 4 p.m. Don't forget to follow, share with friends, and send us your feedback at hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.